Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this symposium, which commemorates the 30th anniversary of our opening. My name is Mihoko Kichikawa, and I am a curator at this museum. Please allow me to say a few words of welcome. Museum of Contemporary Art Tokyo is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. Since opening in 1995, we have continued to organize exhibitions and showcase our collection and also provide education and outreach programs. We have continued to be active in various fields, and when people talk about contemporary art, it actually encompasses many different things, and we have continued to tackle various activities while we have continued to assess and also reassess the fields that we continue to transact and also to bring together according to the changes in our times. During the changes in the past 30 years in society, what roles the art museums can hold and what type of functions they can fill and what type of sites they can become, these are all aspects which are undergoing transformation. This year, 2025, as we celebrate our 30th anniversary, we'd like to look back over our past 3 decades and think about the 3 decades in the future, and to think about how contemporary art can be, together with all of you, the audience. This symposium has been planned primarily with the younger generation who have just newly joined our staff. These are young curators providing us with new perspectives and new angles. Their individual experiences have provided the basis to try to think about the possibilities and the potential for contemporary art museums which transcend traditional frameworks. So now I'd like to hand the microphone over to the organizers. So, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this symposium, and I shall be functioning as the moderator. My name is Gon Sang-he, or Sang-he Kwon, and before beginning the presentations, I'd like to give you some information about the general flow of our schedule. I shall be talking about the background to the symposium, and then I shall be introducing the speakers, and the 6 of us on the stage will be giving presentations, and at the end we will be having a discussion based on the presentations. Now, I'd like to talk about how we came to organize this symposium. When we thought about this as our 30th anniversary symposium, we started by thinking about what changes in society and in the arts have been experienced during that time. And our formal opening date was the 18th of March, 1995. In January of that year, the Kobe earthquake occurred. 2 days after we were opened, on the 20th of March, there was a sarin poisonous gas attack on the Tokyo Underground, the subway. So this gives you some idea of the circumstances under which we opened. And in the same year, Windows 95 was launched, which really marked the beginning of the dramatic spread and popular utilization of personal computers and the internet. In the case of this museum, we have our library, and when we were opened, it was referred to as the Information Center. However, looking at the arts from the 1990s onwards, Nicolas Briot and relational aesthetics, relational art, became important, where you had artists cooking in galleries and serving it to the audience. And so the audience became a part of the actual project. Also, socially engaged art and participatory art, where the audience became an integral part of the arts projects, became important. So, and also art collectors became important. So groups working together became very crucial. And so in that way, community spaces, alternative spaces, not just the museum's white cubes, as a context became extremely vibrant and extremely important. At the same time, performance, workshop, project type, pieces also became extremely interesting. So it was not just object-based traditional artworks, and new forms and ways of creating and experiencing art all began to appear. And under these circumstances, people were not just appreciating art or experiencing art, they would eat together. They would also have discussions together. They would also make things together. So I think those would be some interesting and also characteristic developments. Conversation, sharing, participation, and also experience are some of the key phrases which come to mind when you think about what these changes meant. So the art museum, art centers, non-traditional art spaces, platforms, collectors, alternative spaces, all of those transcended physical spaces to create a place or a site for people to be together and to work together and to be together. So with that in mind, we wanted to make this into an important pillar of our discussions in this symposium, to think about what shape could be taken by contemporary art museums in the future. All three of our guests have been working with alternative spaces and conventional, traditional museum spaces, and also alternative ways of creating and also of experiencing art. So you have created and given birth to various different types and ways of experiencing and being a part of the arts. And so together with these three speakers, we would like to proceed with discussion. But before that, I should also try to introduce my colleagues as well. But before that, I'd like to introduce our three speakers, our guest speakers. Eunice Chang. Who's an associate curator at Hong Kong's M+, and who's also working with Current Plans and Art Space as a co-director. And by creating and working on exhibitions, she's really promoting some. The main core of her activity is really experimental, in that trying to stimulate cross-disciplinary and cross-field dialogues and discussions. She's also provided some interesting site-specific installations and performances and new commission works, which are worked in a collaborative format, so these go outside of the conventional and traditional formats. Asian Avant-Garde Film Festival and the live art program have been part of what she has been able to create. She's also taken part in the Tycoon Contemporary and worked on the Book Art Book Fair from 2018 until 2023 as a curator. And next to Eunice, we have Ji-won Yu. Jiwon was working at Lium until quite recently, but now she is working as a co-director of YPC Space. She's a curator, writer, and translator, and from the 2010s onwards, she has been an important critic and also exhibition creator, primarily in the Seoul area. The Seoul City Media Biennale assistant curator is one example of past work, and also it connects to her experience as a curator at Lium. Highlights would include Art Spectrum 2024 Dream Scream, co-curated Liquid Tiravania, and also the Bomba Park Solo Show, and Pauline Baudry, Renate Lawrence curation. She is running the YPC space currently. And last but not least, on your far right is Leonardo Bartolomeus. Baruto is a curator at the YCAM Yamaguchi Center for Arts and Media and a graduate of Jakarta Institute of Art. From 2019, he has been living in Yamaguchi and was previously a member of Ranlupa and also of Good School Ecosystem. Through his experience with the artist collectors, he has also a strong interest in the intersection between community engagement and also the arts, which is a key aspect of his work at YCAM. The Flavor of Power, in partnership with Bakudapan Food Study Group, is one example of what he's done. And the Dance Floor as Study Room, which is a solo show which concluded quite recently, would be a few examples of the extremely active curatorship that he's been involved with. So these are three speakers who are going to be talking about places together.
それから今日のシンポジウムを企画した当館の全員私を含めて3人についても簡単にご紹介したいと思います。一番右側の原田美代さん。
This is Mio Harada, who is one of the trio of curators. How do you do? My name is Mio Harada, and I'm a curator at MOT. I'd just like to take a few seconds. In July of last year, I joined MOT, and before that I was working at Kanazawa 21st Century Museum of Contemporary Art, and prior to that I was studying curation at the grad school at Tokyo National University of the Arts, and so my experience really was learning about institutional and also alternative spaces and also performances and how to present them. How do you do? I'm also working for the Museum of Contemporary Art in Tokyo. My name is Mayuto Irigoe. I joined in June of last year, and prior to that I was working at the Musashino Art University Museum for about 8.5 years. And I had tended to work on contemporary sculpture. So sculpture was a key aspect of what I was interested in. And Isami Wakabayashi's retrospective was the last project that I handled then. And they tended to be Japanese sculptors and a key part of what I was involved with. I'm also very interested in the documentation in the form of catalogs or in publications. So how exhibitions can be connected together with the publications and how we connect them together is what I'm interested in. Thank you.
最後に私ゴンからもちょっとご紹介
And I'd also like to introduce myself.
私も4月から入社しました。
I joined in April of last year. Before that, I was an independent curator. I'd been working like that for a couple of years. 2019, Yuki Kobayashi, the artist, and I created performance platform Still Alive. And performances were the core pillar for long-term collaborations with young artists. So performances as a means of expression, introducing them was not the only aspect. We were also interested in thinking about how we could possibly try to think together about how we live, how our lifestyles are conducted, so living form. And that is part of what I've been doing for about 4 to 5 years. Also, I was working with Theatre Commons and performance festivals. And various other means of communication and also of creating places and spaces to be together. So how we can actually try to develop these performances and also these experiences is what I'm interested in. Thank you. So with no further ado, we'd just like to take a few minutes to set up the stage for our presentations, which means that we all change our seating arrangements. The first presentation will be about MOT, this museum, and the presenters are going to be Torigoe-san and Harada-san. Each of the presentations will take about 15 minutes each. So first of all, I'd like to call upon Torigoe-san and Harada-san to give a presentation for 15 minutes. Thank you. We apologize. My name is Mai Torigoe, and we're talking about atsumaru basho, places together. Places together is the key word or the key concept. Based on that, we'd like to have the 3 speakers and all of us thinking together. And as a starting point, I'd just like to introduce a part of the activities that MOT has been involved in. Going back 100 years, how we came to be. 1926, the Tokyo Prefectural Museum was opened. This was the first public sector art museum, and it had the official academy exhibitions, also the private associations of arts groups having their own exhibitions. This was regarded as the ultimate pinnacle of achievement, the institution that everybody aspired to in the arts. But when we think about museums and art spaces as places together, it's very important to think about this and also what this venue provided. The Yomiuri and the Pandan in the 1960s became a crucial site for what was described as anti-art, the contemporary artists of the 1960s. It was really a melting pot for experimentation. And there was no jury. Everybody could send in their work, which meant there was chaos. So the 1963 was the first final example. On the far left, you can see the Jiro Takamatsu piece, which is a piece which was placed in the gallery, but he tied rope to it and dragged the rope outside of the venue. So it was almost like a happening, back, as to use the phrase, back in the 1960s. But these are the artists who became extremely important and influential. And while these people were accepted, when one of the key artists, such as Akasegawa, was invited to create their own independent private sector independent exhibition, he actually felt it wasn't going to be quite so meaningful, because he said doing it in the institution, the official space, was a key point, and crushing that. The other important exhibition which took place at MOT, at the Museum of Tokyo, prior to Museum of Contemporary Art Tokyo, was the 1970 Tokyo Biennale, Between Man and Matter. This is organized by the critic Yusuke Nakahara. From the right, you can see work by Christo, and then there's Sol Lewitt. This is prior to the actual opening. This is all done as part of the installation phase, and this documentation showing the process was also very important, where this was a place for people to come together, and also to be a proactive part of creation. However, we should note that the museum only had professional curatorial experts assigned to it in 1975. So in that sense, it is quite different from what we describe as an art museum today. However, the Tokyo Museum, the Tokyo Metropolitan Museum, as they called it in the post-war era, was an important core element and an important focus for the tremendous movements that were occurring in contemporary art, and provided a space together. This is the current iteration. And this museum also was not just a place to gather, it was a place for gathering, in the sense of gathering things together as well as people together. So collection was a crucial element, and they became seriously involved in that from 1975 onwards. They also managed to collect about 3,000 pieces, which were reflective of the times that were. However, they had no permanent gallery space, and so this was inherited by the Museum of Contemporary Art Tokyo, this museum, together with the education and research, and also with the library, and also with the special exhibitions. Now, we have about 3,000 pieces which were gathered by the Tokyo Metropolitan Museum, which was formerly the Tokyo Prefectural Museum. Museum of Contemporary Art Tokyo has managed to collect 2,800 up to now. Plus, so we have about 5,800 pieces in our total collection. Now, 5,800 is an important characteristic, strength, attraction, and also a mission that we have inherited. When we think about the fact that this collection, which reflects both modern times as well as contemporary, in other words, pre-war as well as post-war, how we can actually utilize and also bring out the best of this collection allows us to provide a space to look back in history, and also where we can actually reassess and think about what comes to mind. The collection exhibition is always fantastic, but today I'd just like to focus for the moment on the special exhibitions. I was a member of the audience back in those days. In 2019, after the renovation, Weavers of Worlds was what launched the renovated version of Museum of Contemporary Art Tokyo. This was a special exhibition where editing was the keyword, and it really provided a new context and a new way of looking at art history. And there were about 3 floors which were all filled with the pieces which were on show. About 400 pieces were on show, 393 came from the collection. And it was astounding and staggering because the activity of gathering, being a place for gathering, meant that it was possible to re-knit and to re-weave and re-edit art history. And that was gave it the authority to be able to provide a counter-argument to the traditional way of looking at history. And the Ryutaro Takahashi special exhibition, which was held last year, meant that we could have 2 floors dedicated to the personal collection of Ryutaro Takahashi, who's one of the most famous collectors in Japan. Early Kusama, Chimpon, Sidecore, some of the latest. All of those came together, and this was organized by Tomoko Yabumae. However, there are 2 pieces, Mamoru Kubo and Minoru Nakahara, which come from our collection. Dr. Takahashi was born 1 year before this painting was created. So this commemorates or brings to mind the year in which the collector was born. It also reminds us of the zeitgeist of the immediate post-war era, also about the changes, the transformations. And going ahead, this gives you the works of Kusama in 1950s, 1960s, and then you can actually imagine what happened after that. Which gives you the possibility of layering the past, the present, and also the future. And all that actually is possible purely because you have this process of continuing to gather and of collecting. Now we'd like to talk about the museum itself as a place to gather, which means to gather together. This document dates from 1993. It gives you some of the intent behind the opening of the museum in 1995. I'd just like to quote from that. The new museum will not just be limited to the post-war era, it also will be showcasing art in the broadest context going up to pre-modern times. The dolls will also be painting, sculpture, prints, also handicrafts, design, architecture, every possible field. And they'll be proactive in planning and also in organizing and realizing exhibitions. They also will be having enveloped and also holistic activities, including music, the theater, and dance, and other arts. I was quite astonished. It covers everything. So there were tremendous expectations and hopes for us. Now, after looking at that and looking at the lineup of the exhibitions, just some of them from the 2000s onwards, looking at the solo shows, fashion, design, also cross-disciplinary, cross-field exhibitions, very wide-ranging and also multidisciplinary activities going on. The exhibitions, of course, are places to gather, where people gather together and works are gathered together. But I'd just like to give you 2 examples which are slightly different. This is the Otake Shinro Solo Show retrospective in 2006. On the right, you can see a live performance by Boadams And on left you can see the final day. And Shino Otake came every single day, practically. And he would give a live performance. When the auditorium is being used, then he would be using the gallery space on the other side of the courtyard where you have the folk sculpture today. And it's a part and parcel of the nature of Otake's work, his practice, also with the sight and of the media. So really discarding the preconceptions and providing this venue as a space together. So mysteriously I slide in. There was also the exhibition 22-23. When you think of this as a place together, 2020, of course, was the start of the pandemic. So gathering together was something that we really had to give very serious thought to, whether it was appropriate or not. So with that in mind, Barto YCAM also was showing Wendy's work, I know, and it's really about the multi-voice polyphony. But rather than talking about the artist, I'd like to talk about the format and the structure of this exhibition. The exhibition itself had a lot of events. So there was a reading group for transgenderism. All the chairs were taken away, and this entire space was used to have a reading group. This is by Rethinking, which is a magazine, and they had a meeting. So when his exhibition, as a member of the audience, it really felt that these activities were not satellite activities. They were not taking place on being realized on sidelines. These were a core element of the exhibition. So curation did not have a single pillar. It was actually consisting of multiple pillars, which all existed and created the concept and the realization of this exhibition. So I really felt it was emblematic and also very symbolic in many ways of the COVID period. Tokyo Art Book Fair, I think many of you might have been able to come here. And from 2019, this museum has been the venue for that. The Tokyo Art Book Fair has existed before that, but 2019 onwards, it's continued to be held here. And as Torigoe-san mentioned, it really goes back to the statement that that Mai just read out from 1993 about the diversity of the different fields, of all of them coming together. Also, it's not just a museum as a place to look at art. The Tokyo Art Book Fair started with independent publishers mushrooming all over the place from the 2010s onwards, and where all the independent people together could try to come together in order to network as the Tokyo Art Book Fair. So it was a new way of coming together and of being together. In that sense, it's a very innovative and different way of being together. This also is the auditorium, this space. This is from last year's iteration of the Tokyo Art Book Fair. So children, grown-ups, everybody could come together. And Finally, when we think about the concept of the museum as a place to gather, up to now we've really been talking about the programs, about the software, as it were, as opposed to hardware. Now I'd like to talk about the physical way, the actual things that we do physically in order to try to make it more welcoming. We continue to have these activities to try to find the spaces which have been left untouched, to try to expand the envelope. However, we have been able to do that with the public spaces that much. We've looked at the signage and also at the fixtures and the furnishing to try to really transform that, because we cannot really rebuild the building itself. Here you can see that the sign is a part of the bench. So it's not an architectural element, it's not furniture. The creator said that this was designed as an interface, and a lot of the surfaces are hard. So cork has been used, and the texture has been very carefully planned in very precise details and nuances. Also, the avenue or the access to the neighboring park has been worked upon, because it's a tiny thing. Just this sign seems to welcome people in. Also, that large sign in the bushes has, I think, given a face, because previous to the renovation, we hadn't really been presenting a welcoming or inviting face to the park itself. This is, I think, something that is a crucial aspect of many different institutions, and this is our answer. I'd just like to introduce this quote from Nagasaka-san, who was working on the architectural group. And there, Nagasaka-san speaks about the gaps where the general public will be flowing in, feels a bit chilly and standoffish. Trying to give a difference there gives you this place where attention is not being paid, which makes it easier actually for people to relate and to engage, which I think really relates to what I said previously about the ultimate institution, the pinnacle of the arts, because it's really going back to the issue of how we have continued to try to expand our field. We are going in the entire opposite direction. We're trying to think about giving greater breathability, making it more appropriate and adapted to the times. And we need to change, both in terms of physical nature and also in terms of mentality, and also in the programs and all the human element that we introduce. So it's merely a matter of being a place to gather and a place for gathering, which we have continued to inherit as our mission from the pre-war incarnation onwards, and also the post-war incarnation, and as a newly formed Museum of Contemporary Art. So we need to find further gaps and possibilities for further development in the orifices, in the places which people have not paid attention to up to now. So thank you, and I'd like to hand the microphone over to the three speakers who are giving their presentations. Thank you, Torigoe-san, and thank you, Harada.
So the next order will be a 15-minute presentation by Eunice.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you again for the museum for the invitation, and happy anniversary, I suppose. So I'm Eunice. Very nice to meet you all. I was just thinking a lot about what happened to myself when I was 30 years old. It's also a time of change, many things that radically morphed and shaped my life when I was 30. And thinking if I was 30 years old and then talking to a 5-year-old me, what would that be like? And I say 5-year-old because I've been running current plans for 5 years. And yeah. So my presentation today is talking on the themes of a living room that turns bugs into features. And I hope you'll find that interesting. Even though I work at M+ now, I just started last year, I just wanted to start with current plans because actually this is my own baby, my own program that started it all. And I've been shaped by my experience of working in museums, but let me start with current plans, basically. Current plans, the name started in 2020 when I really wanted to get out of the museum scene after working in Taikun for a few years. I wanted to get rid of that bureaucracy and museum infrastructure. So me and a friend, we started this place called Current Plans. It was started with Wing Sha, a photographer that some of you might know, who worked closely with Wong Kar-wai on film photography. We both wanted to create a safe space, experimental space for interdisciplinary exchange. Because in Hong Kong, our scene is really small and tight, but also quite fragmented. So you will have categories of artists, galleries, architects that are quite separate, but you only meet together during drinks or dinners per se. So we wanted a space that was encompassing everything. So our vision really hasn't changed much since we started 5 years ago. It's fluid, so I really want it to be encompassing and in flux and always responsive to what is happening socially, so it can be very quick. I want it to be generous, so encouraging knowledge sharing across medias and disciplines. So it doesn't really matter what the medium is. For us, the medium is not the most crucial thing, but what you do with it. So we sometimes do shows across disciplines, from architecture to video game to novel writing. And then last but not least, disruptive. I don't know where this quote is from, but I really love it. It's maybe a bit kitschy to say it, but to comfort the disturbed and to disturb the comfortable, I think this really encompasses what I want art to be for me. So first, I want you to think about your living room. What are the 5 first items that come to mind when you think about a living room? Give you close your eyes to think about it for a minute. So for me, the first thing that I think of is a sofa, a big sofa, a TV, a small table or a coffee table, plants, and windows. So that's how I started thinking about the space. 5 years ago, we were in a loft space in Sham Shui Po, a grassroots area of Hong Kong. It was old fabric storage in the second floor walk-up. So it's not so accessible. It's actually on the second floor. And just buying furniture and finding secondhand things online, I slowly tried to build a living room, I realized. I didn't set out to do it at first, but I slowly built it like that. So I think, thinking about the few items that I just mentioned, I think they all have connections with what I want my ideal art space to be. So for example, if you think about sofa, it's somewhere where you can sit with a friend. Obviously, a sofa is not one person sofa. It has to be 2 or 3 people. So something to welcome friends, thinking about the table. So it's something to support something, to put a book, to put maybe a coffee, to put dinner to have with your friends or with your partner. So something that encourages nourishment. Thinking about the TV. I'm still from the TV era. So something maybe to do with leisure, maybe to do with exploration. I love playing video games. The TV is something that helps me enter another world. And then thinking about plants. I think plants are super crucial to have in one's home. So again, thinking about nourishment, thinking about taking care of something. I really like looking at my plants that change over the seasons. And last but not least, windows. So windows, of course, for sunlight, for air, but also as a metaphor for seasonal changes, for seeing things outside, for having outside things come in to see inside. Yeah. So based on that, these are some items thinking about the idea of gathering and collaboration and coexistence is what I find art spaces to be crucial in our society. Because I don't know about you, but in Hong Kong, we don't have that many gathering spaces that don't require you to pay money. So there's a lot of cafes, there's a lot of malls, there's cinemas, but you always need to, you feel the obligation to buy something, a ticket or buy a coffee. But there's not much space where you can just gather and talk with your friend or by yourself that you feel free to do so, right? So also because we are a nonprofit and experimental space, we actually don't have a lot of funding. It's also crucial that we have to work together, obviously. So we are really working at the pace of trust and friendship. So these are just kind of brainstorm points of what we have done so far, which I think embody these, like from live performances, screenings, a lot of parties, recently a lot of cooking. I think food is crucial, which I will talk about more later. We now also have an artist in residence. So I've always been thinking about these questions of the personal versus the collective. Like, how much do you balance when you create a space or create an exhibition or program? How much is a personal experience, but how much is a collective experience with the visitor? How much is about intimacy and the spectacle? Now, I think in a digital world where everything is like Instagrammable, the spectacular is also sometimes like the curatorial vision of a show, right? So also the slowness and the reactiveness, there's the bigness and the smallness also kind of affects how fast or slow you respond to things. Sometimes it's good to have fast response because social things happen so quickly, right? Like red lines and things appear suddenly. But at the same time, it's also great to have some time, to have some slowness to develop things through with artists, with your friends, with everyone. And then last but not least, of course, the stability versus the precarity, which is, I think, what we are all facing as workers in between the institution and the nonprofit, the experimental, always push back and forth. So here are just a glimpse of things we've done, like music performances, performance lecture, food cooking, even a tattoo workshop in the middle of an exhibition, where the artist is the tattoo artist, and he tells you the story of his work while tattooing you. And then some of the posters, because I really love graphic design, and I will explain a bit more in the next slide, is because I used to run a book fair as well. So I work very closely with my partner who does all the graphic design, and sometimes I do it myself. And I think, yeah, this is, the visuals already give you a sense of what we're trying to do. And I realize I'm wearing the similar colors. Everyone's been telling me today. So going back, I will be jumping back in time, back and forth in this presentation. So in 2015 to 23, I worked in Taikun Contemporary. It was a new kind of Kunsthalle model, museum that doesn't collect in Central. And one of my first jobs was actually to purchase and collect and research on Asian artists publishing. Because at that time, we didn't really have a library or collection that's more about zines, about independent publishing, and so on. So having that really opened up my mind, and I realized the workings of a small press is very similar to running an independent space. So there's many parallels between making books and curating exhibitions, I think. So during that time, we did this art book fair called Booked, and I've been running it with our colleagues for 5 years. And apart from getting a lot of international publishers in, local ones, we also developed a lot of fun programs, workshops, talks, lectures, screenings, and so on. And even though I don't work there full-time anymore, like every year I do get the chance to go back to co-curate the programs with them, which I love. So, and then another part of this presentation I wanted to talk is also about this living room that is able to turn a bug into a feature. So maybe some of you have heard of this phrase before, bug as in, not really a bug, I just put that there because it's cute, but bug as in the computer debugging. So the bug as in a flaw or imperfection or something that is going wrong. But there's this idea that instead of trying to solve an issue or put a bandage over it or heal it, you can actually turn this scar or this imperfection into a characteristic, a personality, or an icon. So I think as someone who's running this DIY space, we always come across a lot of imperfections and flaws, obviously. But for the past few years, I really learned how to, instead of solve it in a manner that maybe a museum or something with enough financial funding can do, why not just use that as an opportunity? And slowly I realized that art can also maybe be utilitarian and actually try to solve problems too. So this is also what I'm thinking, how to embrace imperfections, and instead of being ashamed or shy over not being able to do things 100%, actually try to subvert and rethink that. Actually, this is also a way of working with artists, with friends, with people that I trust, and turn these issues into some kind of process that I really enjoy. So, for example, this is a show that I really, really loved. Around 2 years ago, I worked with Tomohiro and Sayaka, two Japanese artists based here. They make wigs, like hair and wigs. It's because the space was in a grassroots area in my neighborhood, and I used to go to this hair salon run by this Chinese auntie who is very outdated, but she's just so lovely that I didn't care about the design. I just wanted to spend time with her. So I was thinking, how can I make an exhibition that even she can understand? An exhibition where I don't have to write any captions or explanations, but she will enjoy. So somehow, by chance, I found this person who works in hair. Like, they use real hair to make wigs for different fashion brands and artists, like from Bjork to Comme des Garçons. And with 2 years of development, because of COVID, because of personal health matters, it took 2 years. And we have very, very little budget. It was, really minuscule. And we didn't want to do a presentation of wigs with a mannequin, which is the most typical thing you will think, right? But because these wigs are inspired by aquarium and sea creatures, before they arrived in Hong Kong, I found a bunch of rubbish, basically, in my storage. A lot of rubbish from past events, past artist materials. So I put it together in the middle, and then I just tied together. And then me and my friends, we just use foam spray to spray this solidified foam to create a mountain. And then in the mountain, actually, if you walk in there, you will notice that there are lots of wigs and little pieces and accessories stuck on there. And then, so we tried to create a whole different way of exhibition design that was unexpected, and people didn't really know how to react to that. But it was so visceral, and the craftsmanship was so strong that people just enjoyed it. And and that was how it was. And a lot of times at the end of the exhibition, we will also invite local musicians to do performances inspired by the show. So this is something that we did as well. And then thinking about another bug, this was a fun one. In 2022, with Christian, we were supposed to do this artist solo show. But suddenly I had to go to Italy for a residency that I couldn't say no. And then he had to go back to home, to UK for some family stuff. But we both didn't want to postpone the show. So we thought, how can we keep on doing this show, but without anyone there? We couldn't afford to pay any staff. How can we do it? So he developed 4 installations, lights and TV related, and they are all motion censored. So we left the space open for 24 hours for 1 month. I was really nervous at first. And I really tried to keep the space clean like that. And then all the artworks would only activate when you walk into the space. So it's been like a haunted house situation. So you would come in, and then the lights in the circle would start to blink. And then on the right side, it was a CRT TV. When you stand in front, something will start to appear. And the door in the middle, actually at the back, has very convoluted, complicated installation with a chain that slowly opens the door, and then you enter. And then you realize there's nothing, but there's the installation of that. So the reaction was hilarious, like seeing people very confused, running around, looking for people. But also, one thing that was fun was we were questioning whether robots and machines could run the space. Like, could they gain autonomy over the curator and the artist? Could we trust people, really? Like, will they come up and steal things or do weird stuff? But actually, in the end, we found that people are much more reliable than the machines. So the capture here is from the CCTV. And the guy in the middle is a friend who, because sometimes when people walk around, they accidentally stumble on the cables. So we asked a friend to go and try to replace and remake the circle. And it was a very fun experience. Like I had friends who just went up there by themselves to help me adjust and kind of improve things. We have some paper for the leaflets. And because it's a very dusty space, the building was the concrete was falling down in some parts from the ceiling. So she just went up with a plastic folder and helped me insert the exhibition text into folders. So a lot of things like that happened in that 1 month. That was so unexpected and touching. So again, this is also the question of actually the art became a problem solver, but at the same time also created new questions and issues and more art. And then thinking of another bug again was in 2023, we ultimately got evicted because the rent just raised super high, double the amount. So I couldn't stay there anymore. And to end the space, I didn't want to end with a bang or do like a final show or something because it seemed too final. I don't want it to be final. So I invited two other artists. They also have their own platforms. One is Still Life, that Sanghae is part of, but I didn't know at that time. And there's Yuki, the Japanese artist, and also Per Platform, a Hong Kong performance artist. They both run platforms to get different performance artists together to do things. So that's why the title is very long. It's currently still planning to perform. So it has all our titles in there. So this was an overnight performance where I think 15 to 20 different artists came in and did their own thing, but also they were improvising with each other. It was really like a circus. You could come in and out anytime and just see different things happening. So yeah, the space ended with this performance, overnight performance. I think we finished till 4 or 5 a.m. and then we even sat around and had more discussions to talk about what happened. Yes. So yeah, so thinking about the bug and these features and all these things, after we got kicked out of that space, last year, we were very kindly offered a new space, which is a totally different space, as you can see, in an industrial loft. And again, with this massive space, I was like, things were happening so fast that I had to respond also really quickly, but without budget, which, as you probably hear from now, is a motif in my life. So this big space, I had no time to rebuild like a big opening exhibition with a group show with many artists, you know. So somehow I found my friend Samuel Swope, American artist but living in Hong Kong. He developed these pieces that were drones. So the balloon in front is actually a string of helium balloons connected to a drone. And the thing in the middle with the blue lights is actually a car tire that he carved out of foam. It's very, very realistic. It looks like it's a car tire, but actually it's a drone that flies around. So it's a very simple show and performance. And it's him flying this drone around in space. Because I feel what better than to celebrate this new massive space than with a machine, a drone that can go to places that humanly we cannot, right? So you just, with your eyesight, you follow this drone around. And that was our opening. And because of this big space, we were able to do a variety of different things. So cooking and music has slowly starting to take a bigger role, actually. Sometimes I even feel exhibitions are not so enough for me anymore. I want to actually have more emotional engagement with people. So we did, Nicole, Hong Kong curator, did this show called Marginalia, where we involved a lot of domestic workers and artists and refugee charities. And we created a lot of cooking programs. And now I have a very good friend, Paola. She handles the cooking program in our space because we have this big pantry and living room area. So we've been experimenting with fermentation as well, which I think is also a really good metaphor for brain rotting and for slowness and for this idea. It's basically, I think fermentation is so in parallel with what we've been trying to do so far. So we're making our own beer, we're making some kombucha, we made some makgeolli as well. And yeah, this is ongoing. And these are just some pictures of friends because they are all part of current plans in my work. And these are different screenings and programs that we've been trying to do. I really enjoy experimental sound and music, and I feel, especially in Hong Kong, at this time when there's a lot of social political change and uncertainties, I feel more and more artists are using their bodies and sounds to go back to this rawness of performing and behaving that doesn't need much explanation or defy vocabulary. So this is what we've been doing a lot. And this is our terrace space. Bad Times Disco is an amazing collective in Hong Kong. And Annie has been doing amazing disco parties at our rooftop. and it's funny because before there was a museum curator who told me like, oh, you shouldn't put parties or these kind of performances in your CV, in your bio. It doesn't look professional. And then I said, do you know how much work goes into organizing one party? Actually, it takes like 1 or 2 months actually, and it's only for maybe 5 hours overnight, but the work is actually the same. And to be honest, the emotional engagement in those 5 hours can be longer than one museum show. So yeah, I'm really interested recently to rethink how we use these spaces together and what kind of engagement happens when we gather. Is it collective? Is it emotional? Is it individualistic? They can all mean different things. And then another one more individual, but also very meaningful for me is because we have this big space, we were able to host one of our performance artists' wedding. And she had a wedding with a documentary filmmaker. And they also, of course, did some screenings and performances at that time, which was so heartwarming to me. So I think it's beautiful when art and life are totally merged together and there's really no separation. And for me, Current Plans is able to do that only because we are so self-financed and we don't have to answer to anything. And finally, I go into the museum part of things to wrap up, because this is also something we've been trying to do in the museum in M+. So I've been part of this project called the Asian Avant-Garde Film Festival, where we started last year, and the next edition is coming in May. So we highlight 60s to 90s artist cinema, but we have a mixture of contemporary filmmakers, artists, musicians, and mostly what I do in this live art program is try to find connections between the traditional or the more avant-garde, the niche, with contemporary makers. I think it's crucial to look at what contemporary artists or creatives are trying to manifest, but maybe due to financial reasons, spatial reasons, they're not able to do so. So luckily with my role in this museum for the live art program, I'm able to support them to make this happen. And I think this commissioning part is also crucial for museums to do. It really helps push the ecology in ways that no other art space, to be honest, can do. So this is one of the performances that we did. It was a collaboration between Simon Liu and Jenny Liu, a brother and sister artist duo. And one is in New York and one is in Hong Kong. But they made this beautiful performance with both film projection and a dance at the same time. And they worked on this separately in the 2 months. And only on the day of the rehearsal that we project the film and she did the dance. Together, and somehow, like telepathically, it made sense. I don't know how they did that. So I'm really glad to be able to share these stories. I think art and curatorial work ultimately come back into storytelling. That's all we can do. And I think the times that we manage to gather together are so precious, because you never know how much time you get left. And I think in Hong Kong, we always have the sense that the time is ticking. We have a, countdown. So it's really precious for me to be able to contribute a little bit and to make some space. And I hope you all manage to make some space in your living room as well for your friends and artists. Yeah. Is the time okay? Thank you.
ユニスさん、発表とてもありがとうございました。引き続き次はユージウォンさんによるプレゼンテーションをお送りしたいと思います。少々お待ちください。
Hi everyone, I'm Jiwon. I am based in Seoul, Korea. It's very nice to see you and to be able to share some of my experiences. And thank you, MOT, for inviting me, having me here with wonderful colleagues here. I think Sang-hae already introduced me to you, but just to briefly introduce myself again, I am creator, writer, also translator, and sometimes producer. And I recently worked as curator at Lyon Museum of Art, which is run by Samsung Culture Foundation. Before I worked mainly in public institutions, such as Seoul Museum of Art and Argo Art Center, which is run by Arts Council Korea. And I'm also currently teaching at Korea National University of Arts and Sungkyunkwan University. And I am member of excuse me, member of Art Writers Collective called Yellow Pen Club. We are celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, and we have a program and exhibition space called YPC Space. And I kind of want to begin with an observation from the past decade of my experience across these different spaces for art, which is that institution could mean a myriad of different things, but the boundary between an institution and a non-institutional setting is not as strict or clear as we make it seem. When firstly, at least from where I practice curatorially, the positions, curatorial positions are precarious. So a lot of curators have to go back and forth the institution. They're at a curator at a public museum, and the next year you're out somewhere on your own. And also what happens is, the artists, they would show their work in a big institution in a survey exhibition, but they would also at the same time show a little film in a smaller scale exhibition as well. So really, we don't really see the boundaries that are very strict between the two. And we also have this discursive resources we can draw from, for example, post-museum and also ICOM's definition of museum, which is that, like you mentioned, it's a place for a gathering. So it's really no longer only object-based. And also we have to point out that the so-called independent spaces are a lot of the times dependent on government funding, sales, or even space hires. So it's difficult to draw the lines. So I am less interested in the divide between the two than what these art spaces as larger expanded physical and discursive field can do. And that being said, I do believe in agitating or disturbing the boundary rather than pushing it or destroying the boundary, because it's not tangible, it's not there to push. And it's a real small irritants that let you know where this line is drawn, if there are lines at all. And there we can start to explore the underlying values, vulnerabilities, and resistance. And so I would like to introduce a couple of recent projects that I've done at Lyon Museum of Art. Over the course of 3 years, I curated 2 larger scale projects, but also I was able to propose 2 smaller scale projects that were that took place in a sort of a non-space, non-gallery setting. So this is, it's a bit dark, so it's difficult to see, but you see the pillars on the both sides, and there's a large LED screen, and this is located at the lobby of Lyon Museum of Art. Excuse me. So this is a single channel video work commissioned by the museum for this very LED screen at the lobby. It's the screen actually functions as kind of a high-tech display of Samsung display. So it's the latest model of LED screens, and it shows you what they can do. Amazing things. Yeah. But when it is not on, it just looks like a black wall, which is part of the architecture. So I've been walking across this lobby hundreds of times, day and night. And I started to wonder what kind of a space is a museum lobby. And conventionally, the lobby space is kind of just like a waiting room or a station where people sit there temporarily before going about their ways to their real destinations. So it's really a non-space or a space that doesn't really matter in a museum. There are lots going on. So Leo Museum has 3 major wings, all built by different architects. There's a very big buildings there. And there's a ticket counter, and there's a cafe where you take your you can order coffee and take out, and museum shop and locker rooms. So there are temporary gathering of people with so many different purposes, not only to go see a show, but I kind of found out that people not only come to see art, but they come here to shop and just meet people. And it's a nice lobby. It's a nice space. It's air conditioned, and it feels nice to be there. So people would just say, like, let's meet at the museum, and sometimes when it's pouring rain, you just come inside for a little. Or if you need to use a toilet, you just come inside. No one's going to tell you otherwise. So that's what's been happening. So I was interested to kind of see how this can be kind of an experimental space where we can explore how art can engage with space and people. So I thought Pauline Boudry and Renate Lawrence are great artists to work and tackle this issue. They mainly work with performance, video, that are mainly inspired by queer performance. And they question the boundary between performing and being, on stage and off stage, choreography and gesture. And to tackle the non-space, I was thinking, where does an art space begin and end? And the result of that is this work, which is called A Portrait. This work features 8 performers who would come in front of this giant black curtain, which, by the way, if there's no performer in the front, just looks like a part of the building because it's so big and it's because of its scale. And even though each of these 8 performers, they have a career as choreographer or activist, singer, performer, but they don't say anything in the video, at least not verbally, and they do not dance or do anything choreographed. So you wonder, like, what are they doing? So some just kind of breathe heavily as if to express emotions, or they just stand there. Or sometimes they have extravagant props, or they're just dressed casually, just like that. Yeah, so you start to wonder what's happening. And like new commissions, you really don't know what's going to happen. So without the protective white walls of the gallery, where there's kind of a common sense as to how you should behave as a visitor or audience. But this is kind of a semi-public space, a lobby. So I didn't know how the visitors would react. But just an example of the picture I took. The visitors were surprisingly very much engaged because it's difficult to not notice the work and answer or respond in some way to the face of this person or character. And because of the nature of this placement and the screen, the work kind of bleeds out of the screen. And as you can see on the reflection from the floor, the stage within the video kind of expands into the lobby. And it brings with that the ambiguity between performing and being. So think about the way it gets you thinking about the way we carry ourselves as another kind of performance, like I'm doing right now. I am Jiwon presenting you with this speech, but I could be just a performer playing this role of a curator who's invited. So it gets you thinking about this dichotomy. This work really makes a lobby as a stage and the people in it as performers. And at a personal level, you get really self-conscious about your movements more and start to think about the factors that go into building that way you present yourself as well. And this is another example of a smaller scale engagement that I've done in non-space in Liu Museum, which was the Puma Park's Ritual of Matter. It was a solo exhibition and performance work by a relatively younger generation of Korean artists, Puma Park, whose works have been considered largely too fragile to show in an institutional setting or unfit to collect to an extent. And I thought she would create an interesting contrast and tension with the museum like Lium. So I invited her, and here the black thing is a pillar in the lobby, and there's like a small opening. You go into this space, and there you go. There's a small room at the museum ground floor. It's at the lobby as well, and it's often used as storage space or archive, like an extension to like the bigger main exhibition. And it's supposed to be a place where you can eat and drink because the cafe at the lobby doesn't offer seating. So this is a place where people can kind of lounge around. So it's not considered like space for art. And it serves a lot of functions and it's largely forgotten, but because it was under the radar, I thought this could be a really good chance to take risks. Although small in scale compared to major projects happening at this time, the project aimed to explore how fragile materials or marginalized materials could make a significant presence. And we joked, the artist and I always joked about how we're going to take over the museum when we were working on the smallest room. This is smaller than a regular office in the museum. So, and the artist's medium was things as fragile as ribbons, glitters, bells, pieces of paper, plastic sheets, even scent and vibration. And there were constant negotiations about what can and cannot be done in the space because it was really the first time that the museum lobby was used as a performance venue. And we talked a lot about, can we do this? Can we do that? How much of the floor should be cleaned every morning when there's like glitters everywhere every day? And can we use the office furniture as part of the production, or is this part of the installation okay to touch or not? So all of these things we had to kind of unpack individually, and it sparked interesting conversations with a lot of the departments as staff member across the foundation who were not normally involved in curatorial projects as well as at all. And and we ended up engaging with the museum guides, the invigilators, and also cleaning staff a lot, because the cleaning staff were very, very confused about what to do. Is this, well, like, we try to make the room look as clean as possible for the photo shoot, but mind you, there were glitters everywhere, so. And also, like, you can see the blue ribbons are the work, and you'll see the sculptures that are Anish Kapoor sculptures at the garden at Lium. And we would keep asking this the staff admin people about like, can we wrap some ribbons around Anish Kapoor work? Is it okay? Or is it like against health and safety violation if we like string a bell or things like that? It's not pushing the boundaries. It's kind of irritating people or bothering the boundary, I would say. So, and also the unconventional approach kind of caused confusion among visitors. And there was an instance where a group of visitors touched, rearranged, and even damaged most of the objects in the room. And the staff members there were kind of confused as to what was the guideline, because the guideline is that you can touch if you want, but please be careful. So there are a lot of range of things you can do with that. So, and then the artist decided to incorporate a lot of what happened into her practice and made new photography work as well. So by doing this, we were able to do things that have never been done before in this museum building. Yes. And this is a part of a bigger project that I've done last year, but I'm going to just skip it because of time restriction. I was just going to show you this because we built a house to house 26 different artists from Asian countries, and all of these rooms had different modalities, whether you can touch or see, or there were people, performers ordering in chicken to eat at the space. There's jam sessions. We had a strict no drinking alcohol policy, but I'm not sure if that was followed through. We had performances at the, yeah. So let me just quickly slide through and introduce a little bit about Yellow Pen Club that I mentioned earlier. So Yellow Pen Club as a group of 3 art writers, we kind of formed organically. We were meeting over like coffee weekly, and we would exchange what we've been doing for the week, and which wasn't a lot. We would just write 3 sentences and just share anyways. This is what I've been doing. This is what I've been thinking the whole week. And as good friends would do, or as good friends would finish each other's sentences, we would even finish each other's essays because we know where what you're going for. And then when I began writing professionally, I realized that, oh, this isn't conventional or this isn't normal, because a lot of our critics take offense when they are interrupted or engaged while they're writing, because there is this authorship that is sort of sacred. So you have to protect their creative authorship. But so when I was working as editor in a catalog or something, I got a lot of pushback from writers when I gave them like honest feedback about their direction. So then we realized that what we were doing was kind of a unique thing or collective learning practice. So we decided to expand it in a way to kind of share that with other people. So we started writing workshops where people can come in and we can kind of do a collective writing. And then because we wanted to do this regularly, so we opened a space in 2022. And we decided to divide it into 2 because we needed a program space where these kind of workshops can happen. I think the workshop images are here. So a lot of the times in institutional settings, programs are treated as kind of supplementary to a major exhibition, where programs kind of help understand the concept of the exhibition, but we kind of have this reverse model where programs are the core initiative, and from that, exhibitions can actually follow. So we have, so whether it's a talk or seminars, workshops, we try to learn from each other rather than having this top-down model of teaching. Okay. And what was really interesting about the whole thing was that imagine you're hosting a dinner party, and a lot of the people or most of the people come, but you don't know anyone. and they keep eating your food. They keep drinking your things, and they don't leave. You want to go home, but they don't leave. That's really what's been happening in our space the whole time. Because you expect a certain group of audience when you throw a party or throw a program. But every time I do things with the collective, it turns out that people who come are people that I have no idea who they are. And then they don't leave, and they don't recognize us. They just get to know each other. They get to be friends with each other. They think of new projects together, and then they leave when they want to leave. So I feel like although we are a small group of 3 people, it kind of grew bigger than what we are. So that's what I feel like is interesting for us. And the exhibitions as well, I'm just going to show you as a grand scheme of things. Artists are allowed to take risks because we are showing their works based on a very extensive conversation. So what they feel like is in process work, or sometimes they're using mediums that they are not really used to. They can show this work so that there will be a lot of conversation that follows in this space. Okay, so yeah, I need to conclude my presentation. If you have questions about things that I just skimmed through, I can answer later. But I feel like the boundary, like I mentioned earlier, between institution and non-institution is really intangible, because institutions would kind of lead smaller group-based programs, voluntary network programs as well, largely inspired by what independent scene is doing, whether they credit this to the independent scene or not. And although this is very inspirational, I feel like this is often how the existing independent scene can be endangered in a way. Because, for example, in Korea in 2000s, there were a number of very important artists or alternative spaces that opened. And after only a few years, major institutions and art foundations would kind of learn from their practices and really incorporated their models. So then in a very short time, there were no longer real distinction between them. And the alternative was no longer alternative. And the line between the two and line of the frontier had to be moved in a way. So a lot of the alternative spaces stop calling themselves alternatives. But I feel like this kind of relationship doesn't have to be antagonistic. Large or small art spaces occupy, I think, unique position in the society that creates grounds for critical and creative thinking, and through tangible and intangible practices, although in different directions. So I feel like in contemporary art, this notion of art for art's sake or autonomy of art is often questioned rather than respected in this context. But I feel like this kind of discourse could serve as a pivotal alibi when it comes to reimagining and reconfiguring the space for art. It's not whether it's an institutional setting or not. We have to discuss it, I feel like, together as art spaces in a larger scheme of things. So instead of autonomy of art, we could think about what space for art can do, and we can really be co-conspirators in creating or morphing this different temporality and forging ties and being slightly out of joint. So yes, that's a piece of my mind for this time around. So thank you.
ジモンさん、発表ありがとうございました。ではちょっと準備を整えて最後にバルトロメオスさんの発表に移りたいと思います。少々お待ちください。
Ready? check, OK。はい、皆さんこんにちは。はじめまして、バルトと申します。
Very nice to meet you. I'm Bart.
Oh, I'm translating myself in English now. Yeah, I'm sorry my voice is a bit weird, I got a bit of cold couple of hours ago, because I don't expect Tokyo will be that cold yesterday. Still, but anyway, so yeah, first of all, happy anniversary to MOT, and also thank you for the curatorial team to organizing this event and invite us. I'm also grateful to be able to share my stories in this program alongside with my fellow speakers. Regarding the Symposium team, I would like to discuss a few projects that I've done in the last couple of years, whether with Ruang Rupa or with YCAM, and how they relate between those two. As the title suggests, I have been exploring the possibilities of creating hackable institutions through my projects. And I use the term hackable in a sense to develop a relationship with my current institution, which focusing a lot with media and technology. However, it could also be interpreted as a way to find, a creative way, much like improvised ways to working and overcoming the limitation of a public art institution. The root of this idea might come from my activities with Ruang Rupa, an artist collective based in Jakarta, started in 2000. When I started working with them, there was a phrase that I always remember, which says, "If art is for all, then it surely starts on the street we walk." The phrase itself, it's not magical or whatsoever, but it makes a strong statement for me about how we should see art as a tool that's accessible to everyone. In other words, also art should be a common good. And this rings true due to the natural existence of collective artists in the Indonesian contemporary art context. I'm quoting a statement from Ade Darmawan, one of the founder of Ruang Rupa, and also artist, where in 2010 he tried to analyze the emergence of alternative space in Indonesia, and while doing so, he tried to define what is it, and as it written, like it's an effort to respond to changes in the society for the sake of the development of ideas of art practices that are more relevant and immediately involved with the reality in the society. And unlike formal institution, collective artists, in my case it's Indonesia, always have more flexibility. I think Jiwon and Eunice also talk about that in terms of organizational structure, programming, resource management. And for example, for Ruang Rupa, they started their practice starting from home, from a house, and then kind of expanding it into like art exhibition, residency, research, publication, music festival, video festival, flea markets, whatsoever, many things. And at that time, one attractive characteristic of the collective artists is they use a private house as their base. And I have to say it's private house because it's usually like someone's house, like your friend's house or whoever that has available space. So these alternative art space serve as a platform for artists to support each other, experimenting and also developing their artistic practice. The house or the private house also fostered a sense of community and provided a safe space for like creative exploration. And by changing the function of the house from private to public or vice versa, Ruang Rupa allows themselves to be always in hackable situation, pushing creativity to produce various art projects with the public. And the domestic element in the private house also give, a different notion about care, as Eunice mentioned before. And this is also perhaps the first curatorial element I learned from Ruang Rupa, which is how to create a common place or a common space, which has been quite evident throughout the development of their practice in the past 20 years. But this is also might not only exclusive for Ruang Rupa, but to many other alternative space or practice. But creating this common space as a core probably also inspired the idea of collective pot a format they use now in good school ecosystem. But also, I think it's better known as lumbung, a term that popularized through Documenta 15. And if you have been visiting there during the period of the festival, there are many practical examples from artists or even collectives that were presented in Germany. For instance, this is called Good Kitchen, a semi-private kitchen located behind the Fredisianum, which is openly accessed by the public. And the collaborative practice of managing this space or by having this common space is not limited to only artistic production, but also to domestic work aspects, including how people taking care of their space while they use it and they're living together. However, when I moved to WICAM in 2019, I found myself in an uncharted territory, a territory called Japanese Public Art Institution. Once I arrived, I tried to understand like how I should position myself in this institution and how I could bring my ideas to them. And apparently, like being skilled at singing Japanese song at karaoke is not really helpful. Dealing with the public and also like bureaucracy, as you might already know, especially if you come from a very organized country such as Indonesia, with pun intended, yeah. But I remember the closest project that I have been working with Japanese public was this project called Ruru Gakko, which can be roughly translated as Ruru School. Ruru is abbreviation of Ruang Rupa, so Ru and Ru. The basic idea of this project is to create an informal education center to work with the locals and use Ruang Rupa resources to realize the participants' idea. The so-called school then became a common space for 11 participants who joined the project for 3 months to learn and work together through workshop, lectures, field research, and also exhibition. And 6 projects were realized from 11 participants because some of them decided to work as a group. And in this project, we work with several residents around Chojamachi area in Nagoya as our students and ask them to submit a project proposal about what kind of things they want to do with their cities. And the project realized the possibility of using common space and art production as a learning model that everyone can use. Oh, this is the graduation photo. So I'm taking inspiration from that project in 2016 and discussing my idea with my colleague at WICAM. And WICAM does not take the form of a museum, it's more like a Kunsthalle kind of things. So the curators, as a curators, we have more flexibility on doing the projects that we want. So when I tried to find out like how I should like justify my practice, and I looked through the WICAM website, and then they have this kind of like principle, which, you know, I think it's kind of also overlap with my practice with Ruang Rupa. So using that principle as a base, I develop a kind of method to structure my curatorial works. I get a lot of help from my colleague to translating this thing. This is the diagram that I presented to the team to share my intention and how I want to create a 3-year plan for my curatorial projects that try to work in a slow, sustainable process. Through this project, I want to propose a new way to kind of using the art center and to take initiative through sharing process, long-term dialogue, and also embracing an open-ended process. My first step to realize this was to ask the education team at WICAM to work alongside me as co-curator. Because I know they're dealing a lot with public in the institution, so I could learn from their perspective how to deal with you know the publics that coming to our institution. And also it's very important for me to understand what is the social attitude for the general public in Japan. This is the first project that that happened under that diagram. It's called Kurikurabo Idosuru Kyositsu, or Kurikurabo Moving Class, which is a collaboration with Serum, a collective based in Jakarta that focusing in art pedagogy. And the project is happened during the COVID-19 rules in Japan, so it's, gathering people is much more challenging, and it looks like my exhibition is a bit more dangerous than you do any exhibition with political content. But throughout the development of the projects, we had interesting discussion about creating freedom, where we learn from the citizen how they build their imaginations. And the project activities range from installation to workshop with students, talking about what is their ideal school, discussion with local figures, and yeah, there's a lot. There's a performance session where people exchanging their ideas. And actually, the artwork in the works is actually a zine called Playbook, which then kind of like trying questioning what is the idea of education for us as the visitors. However, I'm not satisfied because there's so many obstacles and restrictions happening during that time, so it cannot be fully expanded the whole possibilities. But the project's still a good learning point for me to understand the characteristic of Japanese audience and how I should modify my project in the following years. So later, after the project's done, we kind of do a series of online talk session, inviting various guests from Japan and also abroad, who have concern or who share the similar interest with education, creating common space, and also art. Throughout the session, I pick up several interesting points. One of them is a term called tsuki, or that I heard from the curator of Tomonotsu Museum, Akigo Suguchi, where he explained a gap space as a concept in his museum that could allow visitors and users, mainly people with neurodiversity, to enjoy the space and do their activities without being too much, feeling overwhelmed. From there, I also try to connect my projects with this group, movement, whatever, called Arte Util Association, which was initiated by Tania Bruguera and adopted by several European museums to change their relationship with the public. Into 2022, I'm focusing more on researching Arte Util and how institutions should use it as a production method. And I invited two kind of like prominent guests, person who work with that, John Byrne from Liverpool and Alistair Hudson from, now he's become the director of ZKM. So, and then we have a discussion with our staffs to kind of like realize this idea. And I should show you a video. The final project of the diagram that I made. It's called Speculative Library, or in Japanese it's become Asoberu Toshokan. This was the last part of the 3-year program, and it served as an experimental model how an institution could function. So inspired by the concept of Tsuki, I tried to creating a gap, and in between a chance or an opportunity through this project. I want to invite local participation to reimagine and reconfigure how art institutions, in the sense of YCAM, can become a playable space, or as an open source and open-ended toolkits for changes. That was also why we choose library as the structure of the project, because the idea of library is already quite familiar for Japanese audience, and YCAM shared the same building with the city library. So introducing it is much more easier than introducing a kind of a new concept. And contrary to the usual exhibition making process in an institution where usually one artist takes the lead, I tried to form a collective, a group consisting of YCAM staff, me and some other friends, visual designers, builders, and also local artists to work together. I'm just skipping through the photo, but the first intention is to create an open platform with an apparent visual structure to spark the user curiosity. We also asked the local citizen to join the building process, which is, a bit problematic for institutional security. And highlighting this openness of the process, we try to open everything. So making the dome, making the decorations, creating workshop with kids to make the signage, and offering them like a space so they can work, do their own activities. So this adaptable framework allows a more versatile understanding how a museum or an institution can be used by the constituents. And we put a lot of stuff that related with the projects that already, been showcasing at YCAM. So every 2 weeks we had workshop. But it's kind of like I'm creating a mini version of the institution and asking the user to hacking it. And by doing so, I'm inviting them to bypass all the rules like you try to do in an institution, because otherwise you need to always go through this permit, whatsoever. And towards the end of the program, the user become more active and organize many events by themselves. And then, so after 4 months of installation, the project ended with many laughs, many failures, so many misunderstandings, and so many dialogues. But I hope the users can remember this, that they have a beautiful memory of using their creativity and their collective effort to develop and use the space together. And not only that, but also some other projects, I try to implement this idea of like hackable platform. Like I did this project with Bakudapan Food Study Group, the game where people can play along and change the rule by themselves, doing a workshop, eating wild plants from mountain, which is again it's quite dangerous for institution. But I'm still fine. This is the last exhibition that just closed last week. It's called the Dance Floor Study Room. Also, following the conversation with MOT, they already been done with Wendelin. I invite her, and we developed this special space design that incorporating a dance area where people can actually, dance with music like this. So, I think there are still several challenges that needs to be explored. I think, however, for me, there are two critical things which I borrow from the observation of John Byrne, who came to YCAM in 2023. A is the institution in question is prepared to begin looking at ways to adjust the mechanism of its operating systems, and B, if that institution also begins to find ways to open this adjustment process up to shared participation with local constituency and also community. So I hope someday we could build a lot of this kind of like hackable art institutions in many places. So thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimasu.
発表者の皆さん、とてもユニークで、
So thank you very much for all the presentations. That they were all very unique and insightful. So we will change our seatings again so that we can have the discussion. So if you could wait, please.
はい、早速ディスカッションのパートに入りたいと
So
思い
we'd
ま
like
す。
to go directly into discussion.
まず
First of all,
一番最初にちょっと私の方からその発表者の方々の内容をもう一度ちょっとそのテーマに関して軽くまとめた上で
like
進めたい
to
と思います。
just
まず
recap what we've
ユノ
heard.
さんからのまずユニスさんからの発表では
In the first presentation
バ
by
グ
Eunice,
を特徴に
we
変え
heard
る
about
リビングルームという
the bugs in the living
コン
room.
セプトについてお話しいただきました。その後ジ
And
ュウォンさんはその共謀者
Juwon spoke about the collaborators and the art spaces, and Bark to talk about hackable institutions. And
登壇者の方々にまずこちらのそのお互いのこの発表のそのキュレトリアル実践
I
の
was
テ
wondering
ー
if
マについて発表をご覧になってどのようにご覧になり
perhaps the
ま
three
したかっていう
speakers
のを
could
まず最初の
comment
質問
on
として
each other's
始めたいと
presentations.
思います。
So could the three of you comment on each other's statements?
質問からすると最初のユニスさんから
Eunice, you get to be first.
お願いします。
I
Sorry.
think the first thing is I feel so impressed that you managed to run your space for 10 years, also with your collective, your teammates of 3 people, and especially impressed to hear that you finish each other's writings. Like I can't imagine how much trust you have with each other and the friendship, and I think that's something that I'm aiming for as well. I'm really trying to do that for the past few years. But also the difficulty, and of course, it's not so easy to find people of the same mind and same pace of life, same vision, to work together in that way. So first, I'm really impressed. And then for Barto also, like moving in between these 2 very different spaces, like geographically as well, right? Just, I don't know, I'm still digesting, but I just feel really impressed how you managed to pull that together.
Yeah, I still don't know how I managed that, but I survived. But anyway, I think you both kind of like, well, again, kind of giving me confirmations that this idea that, you know, art should be available on the street we walks, like it's really still alive. I mean, I'm really impressed like how you can pull off all this performance, wedding party, cooking. It's kind of like, I think it reminds me a lot like when I'm working with the artist collective, and I think maybe we shared the similar situations, like how then when we move to like the more established institutions and how we, you know, kind of trying to hack our way, like with yours, like how you kind of dealing with all this what hospitality, like cleanliness, like whether this is art or not art, should we clean or not? Yeah, but it's kind of like an interesting conversations, no? I think with the public and the institution itself. So thank you very much for sharing your stories.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I'm so happy to get to know your practices. And I know there are a lot of other things that we couldn't share in public, but I'm sure there had been a lot of troubles under the cover because institutions and all the contexts that hold everything together, it can be very finicky. One time it's okay to do these things, and another it changes. Like Eunice, you said how the rent went up, and these kind of things that seem unrelated to what you want to do in terms of artistic practice impact you and impact us so greatly. It almost feels like it is shaping us. And also, like Barto, how you were going through all these different activities and engagements that you've done with local community, and I'm sure it's not all bubbles and happy stories. And it kind of made me feel like we are always looking for this little opening, little chance, like opportunities to kind of present itself, but it's in the guise of like a really troublesome, like a burden. Like you feel like it's now we can't go anywhere. It's like now we can't go on anywhere. But then something kind of opens mid-crisis. So, and especially when we're like all stuck in some sort of crisis, and whether it's like internationally or in locally, I feel like it's really important to share these like knowledges and experiences so that we can keep trying to find an opening. Yeah.
I'd like to thank the three speakers.
そうですね。
And
私がその美術館に勤めていたりとか展覧会を作っていたりすると、
when I
ちょっと
work at an institution
キュレーター
or
ってい
plan
う立場として
exhibitions,
どういうふうに振る舞うべきかっていうのをいつも考えるんですね。
I'm
で
always
最後にその
questioning
バルトさん
or
が
asking myself how I should act as a curator.
私のレスコントロールな状況っていうのを作りたいなっていう
You
ふうに
said less control, which is a state that I aspire
ただ
to.
それを全部自
I
由
want
に
to
して
have
し
less
まったり真
control.
っ白な
But if
状態から
everything
始
is
めるっていうふうに
completely
なる
left
と
free
すごい難しいいろんなプロジェクトをするのが難
and
しい
there is
状況
no
になってくる
control, then it actually becomes very difficult to realize projects,
トップダウンな
which is
形
why
で
curators
何か
tend to have
管
to
理したりっていうふう
dictate
にしなきゃいけないんですけれども、そこ
to
の
give
バランスっていう
structure.
のがいつも難しいなっていうふうに思っていて、
But the difficulty is always
で
going to be
まあ
how do you
それは
balance
オリンピック
everything
スペースでも
out?
美術館でもまあいろんなスペースでキュレーターの
Whatever
立場ってすごい難
space,
しいと思うんですけ
whatever
れども、
curator,
なんか
alternative
その
space,
まあ
institutions is always going to be
私
difficult.
たちも美術館で働いてて
But
どういうふうに
you have experience of
これから
working in
こう
art museums,
いいか
institutions,
とか
and
あったら
what do you
教え
think
て
is going to be the
ほしいな
best
といろいろ
path
ディスカッション
forward
でき
for
たらな
us?
と
What would your advice be about those issues?
Do you mean for MOT or like for us? Yeah, I mean, I think for me it's still important when I'm hearing my own voice. It's for me it's very important when it's not a curatorial project for me. I think it's more important if the institution take it as their attitude. That for me become more, because curatorial project, I mean, you know, we are disposable. Like once the contract end, like you go. I mean, the institution can just stay, like do whatever they want to do. So I think for like why I did my project was just, again, like we talk about creating, pushing boundaries, or like, you know, agitating the boundaries, like the rules itself. I think it's good to introducing like different formats that are unfamiliar, because, you know, like museum practice, it's very old, 200 years old probably. So it's not really that difficult to make that change. So yeah, I think one, like by slowly pushing it, like art institution could be like a place that, you know, can create a better environment for us as human to kind of like gather and also perhaps discuss, you know, especially within this social political conditions that happening in our generations, where everything seems to be like very polarized. I think it's very important that art institutions take a step forward in order to ensure that everyone shared their voice, and also we could have a safe dialogue inside it. So yeah, it sounds too noble, but yeah, that's probably kind of my my wish.
Control is a very important issue, I feel like, when you're a curator, because if you lose control, like what the hell will happen? But I think it goes for all three of us that we have a lot of hats that we switch. We have a lot of different roles that we're playing at the same time. I used to work as coordinator, translator, like part-time, whatever, because the economy is so precarious and the way it is structured, the way the labor market is structured is that we are all precarious. And in this generation, we go into this precarious market. It's not only this way because we are working in the art scene, it's like this everywhere. And what it has taught me is to kind of think about everyone else's position at the same time, whereas I'm not only a curator, it's not it's not something that identifies me as a whole person. You can be in a different situation, in a different context. So I feel like when I'm working at an institution like Liam or in a Seoul Media City Biennial where I used to work, I still assert a lot of control in what I do because it provides a safer ground for artists to practice what they need to do. If we don't control our budget, or if you don't have idea of schedule or how things should look like, it doesn't really give the artist a safe grounds to do it. So I feel like there's like I can't cite it exactly, but there was, I think, a research where you if there's like a cow or a kettle, if it's tied to a certain degree, they graze more freely. They walk around more freely than like a really free cow. So I feel like that kind of anchor is important, and the kind of backgrounds, the diverse backgrounds that we have in terms of non-institutional settings kind of help us into negotiating between different roles and different stages in completing a task. But then in art spaces like YPC space, we don't need to do that, and we don't even need to like project a mission statement even. We don't say we're whatever. Because I haven't put any text up on the PowerPoint because I feel like the joy comes from not knowing what you are. What you do is what you're going to become. So there's this different spectrum of or degree of control that we have when it comes to different contexts. So I think I'm kind of trying to enjoy the ride. But it's also an issue I have always when I'm trying to work as a curator.
I think it's really a complex question, obviously, and each institution has its own personality. But when I was working in Tycoon, I really felt as an institutional curator, or the institution is kind of like a farmer situation. Again, like this urban analogy, but a farmer working on different patches. So there's cabbage, I don't know, strawberry, tomatoes, but all at different seasons. But you have to tend to them at the same time. So you don't only grow one thing at one time. But then you also have to mediate. You want the strawberries to grow, but you also want, I don't know, you need to keep the insects or something away, but then you cannot use insecticide, you need to use organic things. So you need to take care of not just yourself, but the ones maybe who will eat it. But then you also want the birds to be alive. Like you don't want to like chase away birds. You want these natural animals to also have a habitat. So maybe it's okay if sometimes they eat 1 or 2 strawberries. But then at the same time, you don't want to make the farm too homogeneous, like for example, palm oil and like having coconuts and all these. These are like evil corporations, and you don't want to turn into that. So how do you also allow for some space where organic, like jungles or like, thinking about Totoro, you know, that moment when these organic plants also grow in tandem in the forest, but also as a farm. So I really feel it's so complicated. It's really down to your personality and your own vision, but I do feel as curators and institutions, there's so many aspects you need to take care of, like not just the visitor, not just the artist, but how to balance everything is always the question. Yeah.
改めて美術館のこれからの現代美術の形
So,
というふうな
if you think about how the museum should be in the future, and that's really the title as well, but both at Barto and I think Eunice, you were talking about Wendelin, but her title when we had our exhibition was onset, and it was really interesting. There was a solid space where we had these hard walls or partitions, but we tried to make that stage very soft. And the Japanese translation for this exhibition was a soft stage. So, we had books there as well. And one of the things I saw the three of you in common was you had parties, you had cooking, and these are all very close to our daily lives. So these are activities that are very close to us, and I think that was extremely important points that all three of you mentioned that in your activities. So from that perspective, I mean, what do you think about that as a place of gathering?
For me, I think those are so popular and successful because they are the closest to life. Like in Hong Kong, growing up, I felt like my life was so separate from art. You go into a gallery or a museum, you're told to be quiet. You need to put your backpacks in the locker. But what if I need to take like my pencil from my backpack? You know, like there's all these unnatural restrictions put on me. So I think why there's a trend in this type of party or like installations like you have outside that is gaining attraction and popularity is because it's so close to life that you don't need any text or contextual understanding. Not saying that we don't need context, but I think this emotional impact of traversing through the space where you feel comfortable in life, but at the same time you're experiencing something totally new and that opens up questions to you. I think that is why for me it works really well. So I think, yeah, more and more merging of art and life is what I feel will be crucial. And that's why we're all working also in nonprofits. You can notice that I didn't engage in any commercial activity because I think the commercialization or seeing this commodification of art for me is also very separate from life. It's not my thing. So that's how I feel.
I think for me it's very important to bring daily life into art institution and vice versa, to bring art to daily life. Like that's very important. Like one of the features that I have in the speculative library is this idea from the local artist named Keijiro Suzuki, who create this element of renting artworks from local artists. So the visitor could come, instead of renting book in the library, they're renting the artworks, then taking it back to their home for 2 weeks, which kind of also create a different interactions with how we usually interact with art, you know, not through galleries or like through like acrylic display. And I think also like the show at MOT for Wendelin, of course, I impressed with the works, with the space design, but also like how you use it. You know, it's the exhibition for me. That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I see the exhibitions as a channel for like the queer communities around Tokyo to kind of taking over the space and have their own dialogue. So I was inspired by that. I was like asking Wendelin, like, what if we do not similar thing, but the same spirits, like creating a space for everyone. So that's where the idea, where the dance floor came from. Of course, not so many Japanese people wants to dance in the daylight situations, but yeah, still some people, high school students come and then so the dance floor then become the channel to understand the works that she showcased in the exhibition. So for me, it's really interesting takes to see like how things that we often see as like not art can actually be used as an art production, and vice versa. So yeah, I think it's still very important to kind of like bringing that to our institution.
Yeah, and in museums and art centers, art spaces in Seoul, of course, incorporate a lot of engagement programs with local residents, people who are not familiar with art. We want to listen to what they have to say and be part of the initiative and project. But all being said, there is another layer that I feel is very important to note, is that for me at least, I wasn't really familiar with how normal or modern museums were supposed to operate, because I was never educated as a child or as a school child. There was really not a program where you go to a museum and learn how to behave. It's something like the way we always say we have never been modern. I don't know what modern museums were supposed to have been, so that we have to push this boundary or we have to go beyond like a post museum. I don't know. I don't think a lot of people they know from theory, but it's not something that we embody. It's not an embodied experience, I feel like. So these engagements and these outreach, I feel like, to local community, making gathering spaces has a very distinct risk where it can be something like a commercial service. We are doing like a service to these people, treating them as consumers. You're paying this amount to come to a museum, so you have to be satisfied in some sort of way. We have to make you happy. Your time at the museum needs to be special. So you have this room where you can come in and meet the artist. This is like a great opportunity. And there is a very thin line, but I feel like this is something that we have to always note. And it's not only the institutions, it's also independent art spaces where YPC space, we always have reading seminars. We invite writers to kind of talk about their practice and stuff. But there are so many different platforms where they offer similar services for people who are not art workers. They're so tired of their daily lives that they want something special after work. They want a community to go to. So they pay a lot of money to go to these reading clubs. And then they feel better about themselves. And then they go back to work the next day. So there's this cycle of where people feel like contemporary art museums are difficult. Contemporary art is so difficult. I don't know what this is. So then the immediate answer should not be make it easier, right? There's got to be like a more subtle way, more complex way to tackle this problem, but I feel like a lot of major museums are gearing towards, this particular show is difficult. Okay, then make something easier so that people can be satisfied and then give us like a good review, like a good customer would like rate rate something in Taberogo or something. So I think I saw like briefly on your site that we have to come up with a different scale. How do we assess success in this context? We can't just like take a poll and say, were you happy in doing this? But museums can be uncomfortable. Like the ideas we share with each other can be very difficult to understand. It's complex issues. So I feel like there needs to be a very multifaceted ways to approach this issue of how to reach out to local community and how can we be a gathering space? What kind of gathering space? Gathering space for all sounds impossible, but then for whom? So these are the things that I've been thinking about. I don't know if that answers the question though.
The presentations were so rich and had so many things to think about that I have all these questions, but for whom? For whose sake are we doing this? It's really difficult. I used to be at a university museum, so that was for the students. But this museum, the scale, the directions, the mission, it's also gigantic compared with the university. I've started to think about public and being public on a daily basis. And because of the nature of this space, or rather this place, the threshold is it's not part of the curriculum, which means it should be available for anybody at all times. People say that museums should be open, but there are people who don't want to go, people who don't go but who think museums are necessary, people who would love to go but who can't. And it's also complex and difficult. And there are so many restrictions and so many things you can't do. You have to protect the work. Cooking in the gallery, having a party, difficult. Which is where, Barto, you showed us, I think it was with the library, where you said that the restrictions actually were good in the sense that it actually made people devise ways to start being active and to strike out. I really was intrigued by that because when there are so many restrictions, so many rules that you have to observe, how do we actually manage to work with or work around that? Could you help us understand more about what you meant and also about the possibilities? I'm sorry, I can't really put it into words properly, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, because the first project that I did, we had a very interesting conversation about freedom because the artist Serum that I invited, they said like we don't want to have any guidelines in the exhibitions, which makes everyone go crazy. I was like, how come you make an exhibition without guidelines? What if the audience confused whatsoever? But then we have a good conversation with the education team that there is some sort of like this notions for like, you know, for people in Japan that in order to understand what is free, you have to create the boundaries. You have to create the box. Then you know inside the box, this is freedom because you know the limit. So then for me, it's not limiting because obviously in Indonesia, it's super chaotic. Like you just you open like and then table, people just come. You know, they could take your table and chairs for some cases, which is, it's not happened. But for me, it's an interesting way to understand because it's a different cultural context. So I couldn't just come and bring this is how Indonesian works. Like, let's open up the space. So it's really helpful for me to understand that conversations and kind of like, okay, what if we kind of giving a clue to the user that they could bypass like certain things, create certain rules, but then they have to interpret it in their own way. For example, in the speculative library, the user can rent the space, the dome, to do whatever they want to do. So I have the rule that they need to borrow like in maximum 3 hours, but I didn't tell them like what they could and could not do. So people start to using it to like as a reading space, as a way for them to play games, as a, you know, eating bento with their friends. So really, really interesting to see what people came up when you give like a bit of challenge on them. And I think it also for me helped me to understand like how the institution should be. Like it doesn't need to be like build a clean wall everywhere here and then, but then, you know, by telling them people like, okay, you can do it as much as you want, but then again, there's a certain risk that might happen that you need to talk with the other user. So it's, yeah, kind of a bit risky, of course, but I'm still working there, so it should be fine. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think it's time to wrap up. So I'd like to ask you the last question. The three of you have continued to work within institutions, you've worked outside of them, you've created irritations, as you said, you've created changes, you've agitated them, you've moved them, So what about the future relationship? What would you like to do in the future as you continue to move around and to do your own thing?
Maybe I work for the next few years and then after that I quit. I'm not sure, but I think I still interested to kind of exploring these challenges that I mentioned, like how we can work in a slowly mannered process and not really rushing everything into like making a project. I recently visited this Malaysian artist named Sushi Sulaiman, who did a very wonderful project in Onomichi. And I think we kind of talk a lot about slow curatorial process. So like how you build a project in a longer span of time and not really, exhibition is not the end of the project. It's part of the process. So I think that's kind of like the direction that I would like to explore a little bit more in the future. Yeah. And hopefully if there's some institution that interests with that, yeah, I would love to collaborate with them.
It's hard to think. I mean, now I'm at the crossroads, so it's a right moment to ask this question, even for myself. I don't know, it's something that, for me, the autonomy and the freedom is the most important thing, maybe, in life. So something that allows me to maintain that, something that allows me to create my own world. Sometimes I'm also very jealous of artists because I also really feel like art is something that you use to get away with things. And I feel like creating the space was also creating something that I wish I had when I was younger. So of course I do hope to maintain it and sustain it. And it's so hard. Keep doing things like that. Keep traveling and meeting other artists and hopefully finding more systems that I can hack also to get more connections, because I mean connections in the sense that we can bring artists to Hong Kong and bring other artists outside as well. Especially nowadays, I think we need more mobility, art-wise. Building a community sometimes also means you get like an echo chamber. It's very comfortable. So I think it's time I also want to break that echo chamber and be more challenged and more scared also.
Yeah, I recently left my position at EUM, and a lot of people were asking, what are you going to do? And to be very honest, I don't know. And yeah, I really don't know. And I do have some projects that I'm working on at YPC Space and also elsewhere. But in the grand scheme of things, there are two very important things. One is money, and the other is just living a life. I think those two are also connected. For the future, I'm here performing a person who has like an initiative, like I want to do this, so I did this. Look at what I did. This is the meaning behind what I did. But at the time when you're actually doing it, it just doesn't feel like you're moving forward. It feels like you're just rolling around, trying to get through the day, just like every single person here, I think. So for the moment, I am not sure. I'm not very sure, but one thing I'm sure is that because of my time in different institutions, I feel like my life has been a little institutionalized in a way, because I find myself without any interest of things that are outside of art. Like, what am I passionate about? Like, what am I interested in? What am I trying to get to? What do I want to know more? These are the sparks that I feel like have kind of faded in my years of really hard work at museums. And I'm not blaming the museums, it's just how things work. So I think I will focus more on just finding myself, trying to find life that I need to live. And in terms of that, because of my recent project at Liu Museum, it brought together 26 different artists from mostly Asian cities, and meeting them kind of opened my eyes up to contexts that are not only Seoul, because I only lived and educated and worked in Korea entirely. So I feel like there are different types, different kinds of lives and different directions and different context. So I'm keen to learning more about more through artists who are not based where I am based. So I'm really excited for the adventure, and yeah, looking forward to everything. And it's really a good time to meet Barto and Eunice in this journey. So thank you so much for everything.
Thank you very much indeed. I do apologize for asking you a tough question, but from there, I think that we have been able to really feel the approach to life and also to how people will be active in the future. And I think it really has given us insight and also many ideas and thoughts. This is going to be the end of today's symposium, but we have our 30th anniversary. We will continue with a series of activities and the performances, the workshops, creating spaces and places will continue to be important for us. And we'd like to ask you for your continued interest in what we're going to be doing. Get this? We'd like to end by thanking the interpreters. Sato-san and Yokota-san. Thank you. Thank you to Bartolo and also Eunice and Jiwon. Thank you so much.